a wall's between us. The first time Officer Maya Reyes noticed inmate Lena Caldwell, it wasn't across a courtyard or through iron bars. It was in the prison library, where Lena sat alone at a wooden table, pressing her palm flat against the open page of a book as if she were trying to feel the words through her skin rather than read them. Maya had been working at Harlow Women's Correctional Facility for 3 years, long enough to stop seeing faces and start seeing numbers. Inmate numbers, sentence lengths, violation counts. She had learned that emotional distance wasn't cruelty. It was survival. She had trained herself to walk through those corridors with a carefully constructed wall inside her chest, one brick laid down every morning when she clipped her badge to her uniform. But something about the way Lena pressed her hand to that page, something so private, so aching in its quietness, cracked one of those bricks clean in half. Maya told herself she was simply doing a routine walkthrough. She told herself she looked because it was her job to notice things out of place. She told herself a dozen clean and professional lies as she stood there, watching a woman read like she was grieving. Lena Caldwell had arrived at Harlow 14 months earlier, sentenced to 4 years for a crime that courthouse transcripts described in cold legal language, but that Lena had lived through in blood and fear and impossible choices. She had protected her younger sister from a man who had been brutalizing their home for years, and the law had seen only the act and not the years of terror that preceded it. She came into Harlow with bruises still yellowing on her jaw and a silence around her that other inmates mistook for coldness. She wasn't cold. She was exhausted in the way that only people who have spent years surviving instead of living can be exhausted. Oh, bone-deep weariness that sleep couldn't touch. She had stopped expecting anything gentle from the world. She had folded that expectation up and put it somewhere she no longer had access to. The library became the one place in Harlow where Lena could breathe. She went there every Tuesday and Thursday when her schedule allowed, and she read with a hunger that was almost physical, pressing into stories of other lives, other skies, other versions of what a human life could look like. The books were her proof that the world outside was still there, still moving, still containing things worth returning to. And it was in that library, 3 weeks after Maya first noticed her, that they exchanged their first real words. Not officer to inmate words. Not procedural and clipped, but actual human words. Lena had asked quietly if Maya had ever read the book she was holding. A novel about 2 women navigating the wreckage of a war-torn country. And Maya, forgetting herself completely for just a moment, had said yes, and that the ending had made her cry on her lunch break. They had both gone still after that, surprised by the sudden, unguarded realness of it. What grew between them after that moment was not fast or reckless. It was careful and terrified and tender, in the way that things are tender when both people involved know exactly how much they stand to lose. They talked in the library when the space allowed it, about books, about the strange suspended quality of time inside Harlow's walls, about what Lena remembered of the ocean, which she had seen only once as a child and still dreamed about. Maya talked about her mother, who had come to America with nothing, and had built something from that nothing with her bare hands. Lena talked about her sister, who wrote letters every other week in handwriting so familiar it made Lena's chest cave in. Neither of them named what was happening between them. Naming it would have made it real in ways that were dangerous, and they both understood danger intimately. Maya began to see what the system had done to Lena, not just the incarceration itself, but the slow, grinding erosion of dignity that prison inflicted daily. She watched Lena navigate the facility with careful composure, keeping herself intact through sheer will, and she understood that what she was witnessing was a kind of heroism that no one would ever call heroism because it wore the wrong clothes and lived behind the wrong walls. She began losing sleep. Not dramatically, not in the movie version of losing sleep, but in the real version, lying in the dark of her apartment, staring at the ceiling, feeling something vast and unsettling shifting inside her. She was a corrections officer. Lena was an inmate in her facility. The distance between those two, facts and what she felt when Lena looked at her, was a distance she could not safely cross, and she knew it, and the knowing was a specific and particular kind of pain. For Lena, the experience was its own form of anguish. She had not expected to feel anything for anyone inside Harlow, She had not planned for warmth. Maya moved through the facility like someone who still believed that what she did mattered, who still carried herself with the quiet weight of responsibility. And Lena, who had been let down so catastrophically by the systems that were supposed to protect people, found herself startled by the evidence of someone trying to do right inside a broken structure. She began to look for Maya without meaning to. She began to time things around the schedule she had learned by memorizing without admitting she was memorizing. She understood that what she felt was impossible, and she held it carefully, the way you hold something you know you'll have to give back, and gently, with both hands, not letting yourself forget that holding it was never really yours to do. The crisis came quietly, as crises often do in real life, without soundtrack or warning. Another inmate, reading the air between Lena and Maya with the particular sharpness that comes from having nothing else to do but watch, made a comment loud enough for a supervisor to overhear. An internal review was opened. Maya was temporarily reassigned. For 11 days, Lena did not see her, and those 11 days were their own kind of sentence, proof of exactly how much she had allowed herself to need, something she had no right to need. Maya sat through a formal review process that scrutinized her conduct, her professionalism, her record of service. She had done nothing technically wrong, but the review forced her to look at what she felt and hold it up to the light, and what she saw was something true and real and entirely incompatible with the life she had been living. When the review concluded with a formal caution and Maya's reassignment to Lena's unit was made, permanent as a deterrent, something had already changed. Maya began to advocate through proper channels for Lena's case to be reviewed, not because of what she felt, but because the record was genuinely unjust and she had access to people who could look at it with fresh eyes. She filed the paperwork herself on her own time, citing the documented history of abuse that had preceded the incident, the lack of adequate consideration of self-defense contexts, and the pattern of similar cases in the region. She did it quietly, professionally, without telling Lena. She did it because it was right, and because the line between what was right and what she felt had become impossible to separate, and she had stopped trying to convince herself they were different things. If you believe in kindness, if you believe that love in all its forms deserves to be seen and not hidden away, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear a story like this today. Let this story reach the people who are still waiting to feel less alone. Lena's case review took 7 months. In that time, the distance between her and Maya became something formalized and professional and honored by both of them with a kind of painful respect. They did not speak of anything beyond what the situation required, but they existed in the same space with a mutual and devastating awareness that is its own form of intimacy, perhaps the most honest form, the kind that does not get to express itself and so lives entirely in what it cannot say. When the review board reconvened and recommended a significant sentence reduction based on newly weighed evidence, Lena sat in the hearing room and felt the news land inside her like something she had stopped believing in, like the first breath after being underwater too long. She did not know, not then, who had filed the initial advocacy paperwork. She found out months later, in a letter that arrived after her release, written on plain paper in handwriting she recognized immediately because she had memorized it without meaning to. The letter did not say anything that would make a good scene in a film. It said that what had happened between them inside Harlow's walls was real, and that the world outside was large enough, finally, for real things to exist in it without having to justify themselves. It said that she had found, in the most unlikely and broken of places, evidence that goodness was still possible. Not perfect goodness, not goodness without cost, but the kind that shows up anyway, that does the right thing even when the right thing is also the hardest thing, that refuses to stop caring even when caring is inconvenient and complicated, and against every professional regulation in the book. Please leave a comment below and tell us, have you ever found something real in a place you least expected it? Have you ever been changed by a kindness that arrived without announcement? From someone the world told you not to trust? We want to hear your story. Lena stood outside on the morning of her release with the particular aliveness of someone returning. to a world they had not been sure they would see again. The sky was the specific blue of early spring, pale and promising, and the air smelled like something beginning. She thought about Maya. She thought about 11 days of absence that had felt like learning a language only to lose it. She thought about what it means to love something carefully and fully without being able to say so, and how that kind of love, unspoken and careful and costly, is still love, perhaps more love, in some ways because it chooses itself, over and over in conditions that make choosing it nearly impossible. She thought about walls, the ones built from brick and concrete and institutional necessity, and the ones we build inside ourselves to survive, and what it means when someone on the other side of all those walls manages to reach you anyway, not by breaking through, but by being so genuinely, impossibly human that the walls simply become less important than the person standing near them. She walked forward into the morning. Behind her, the facility sat in its gray permanence. Ahead of her, the world waited with all its ordinary and extraordinary possibility, and in her pocket, folded into quarters, was a letter in handwriting she knew by heart. Proof that even in the most unlikely and broken of places, something true had found a way to survive.